Good evening, everyone. We're about to start this special call meeting of March the 12th, 2024. Before we do, I'm going to stand for a moment of silence, follow that by the Pledge of Allegiance to our country's flag. Anyone who would like to join me, please feel free to do so. Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, I gotta adjust my chair. He is here. Thank you. All right, first item on the agenda. Most of the time I ask for a motion to get it on the floor. However, since this is special called and there may be some explanations and things that might be helpful, I'm just going to turn everything over to Dr. Langford and let you get started on. All right. Then we'll ask for a motion after that.
All right, so we sent out a lot of information. First off, let me start by saying thank you to Chris Harrison and Amanda Brown and their teams, because you know, we opened the rental bleacher bid on Wednesday, Chris, I think. Yeah. Okay, and then Chris spent most of the next 48 hours or 36 hours working through what it meant and what flexibility we had to try to get the best possible rate for our schools. So really, like, I think we can narrow it down. Let me just run through real quickly, and then I'll just show you what I think are the two best options for the rental bleachers. So just a reminder, our goals for our athletic facility projects: have the least impact on our students, families, and fans. Work together with our community to meet the short and long-term needs of our athletic facilities. Get it fast, get it right, address the needs of each campus, and lift the heavy burden on student support organizations for building athletic facilities. We've looked at this slide a lot over the last couple months. Goals for rental bleachers, just trying to think through this: have the least impact on our students, families, and fans. Maximize the time to get stadiums ready for fall sports and activities. Remove rental bleachers as quickly as possible after the last home game, and the most cost-effective approach to preserve capital money moving forward. All right, so next steps is to approve one rental bleacher scenario for moving forward. Approve the amendment to move funds from capital to operations to pay for the rental bleachers, and then once approved by the school board, the Sumner County Commission will need to approve the transfer of funds from capital into operations. And then just to reiterate, this is not new money. This is money that's in our account currently. Just whenever we make a category change, a major category change, it requires school board approval and county commission approval. So basically what we would be asking the county commission to do is to move the funds from capital into operations. And you know, again, if you look at the amendment that Ms. Brown put in, it's specifically labeled to cover the cost of rental bleachers. So now I'll tell you that you know, these came in higher than we had hoped. 1.5 is what we looked at. So we do have one scenario that's close to that, and we're just going to talk through. These scenarios. So scenario 4, the first 3 scenarios that are listed are significantly higher than what we had budgeted for, and they had some things like extending all the way to the end of November. A couple things with that. What we've learned from these bleacher companies is when you pay for them, they're going to generally leave them there because they've got a trucking schedule and everything else that they've got it set up to when to come and pick up. We're going to want those bleachers out after the last home game. So Mr. Harrison worked with the bleacher company to get some options for us to look at to minimize the amount of time that the rental bleachers are there at the end of the football season. So scenario 4 is stage rental bleachers from May 3rd to November 1st. That covers May activities at Beach High School. That covers Hendersonville High School's graduation. It also lets us, I have a little concern, you know, last year, everybody was so thankful to have home football games that we were able to cobble together different types of rental bleachers. And renting bleachers in August and September is not the best time to rent bleachers. Everybody that we talked to said, you don't really want to rent bleachers in August. It's like we are well aware of that, but we don't have much choice. This year, I think we'll have our fan bases will have a different expectation. I also want, like we got some things like in Portland on the home side, one of the lights was basically connected to the stadium, so we lost one of the lights. We're going to have to make sure we have adequate lighting at Portland. We got to make sure we want these to be as as accessible as possible. We want to make sure everything's set up and ready to roll. I'm a little concerned on the options, even though they're cheaper from July 17th to November 1st. I'm a little concerned that we're backloading a lot of work to be done into a very short time period. Football stadiums are way more than just bleachers. There's a whole lot that goes into it. I know it's significantly more, so I wanted to look at two different scenarios that kind of capture both things for y'all to make a decision. So I think the best scenarios out of all the ones that include May, you know, we've stated that Hendersonville High School's graduation is a big event. I like the idea of being able to have, you know, a month and a half, roughly 2 months, to make sure our stadiums are operational and ready to roll when August hits. Scenario 2 is staging the bleachers for Hendersonville High School's graduation and then taking them down and restaging from July 17th to November 1st. And then, you know, we could purchase an add-on to this. It's right at $1.5 million if we just do the bleachers. We could go ahead and purchase 8 sets of 10-row bleachers. We could try to use those at Beach for their May activities. My concern there is I talked to Mr. Gilly from Hendersonville several times the last couple of days, and after the tornado, the baseball field at Drake Creek Park got hit pretty hard by the tornado, and they ordered bleachers in February, and now they're telling them into May, 1st of June, before those bleachers that they're buying will come in, similar to the ones that we would be looking at. Everybody promises you 3 to 5 weeks of turnaround time. That 3 to 5 weeks tends to become 4 to 6, and then 6 to 8, and then 8 to 10. My concern there is I don't really want to promise Beach High School anything and then not be able to deliver on it. It would also require a significant amount of time on our maintenance team to put these together. These would come in boxes and we would put them together. I think it is something for us to look at either this year or next year in the budget. I think this is a great price on these 10-row bleacher sets, and I think we could look at. We've got about 8 different locations, but that's a conversation for a different time. But it was helpful. I appreciate Mr. Harrison getting that quote because it does give us some numbers to look at moving forward. So that's scenario 2.
It says scenario 5.
I'm sorry. Scenario 5. Thank you. Scenario 4, scenario 5. Okay, so my recommendation would be to approve scenario 4. It allows us to set up and check everything. I will say that the feedback that we got from Beach High School was that the stands that we had last year were not sturdy enough in the student section. The administration had to do a lot of work to make sure that the students didn't jump up and down and everything. So the bleacher company had already identified that they needed extra girding underneath it, and so in this spec is significantly more girding underneath where the student section would be to make sure that they come out and check every week or two to check the bleachers to make sure they're safe, make sure there's not any bending or anything like that. But they're going to try. I think they learned a lot. I think it was the first time they'd staged high school football and realized that high school football fans are a little different than race fans or something else. They jump around a lot more. So purchase bleachers have a 3 to 5 week lead time, best case scenario, require a huge commitment from maintenance to assemble and disassemble, and suggest that we look at our overall capital budget to purchase the 10-row bleachers at a future board meeting. So those would be, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. It is significantly more than what we had thought about, from 1.5 to 2. I do have some pretty serious concerns about getting everything turned around. I'd like to go ahead and control the things we can control, and then have everything set up and ready to roll, start with the football season.
Ms. Hawkins?
So let me understand. Scenario 4
begins in May 2nd?
Yes, ma'am. May 3rd.
May 3rd, okay. And that is just for graduation, or is there any other reason to do it that early?
I think that they would, you want enough time to, I don't know that these will actually get put in on May 3rd, but that's the timeline that we're shooting for.
But are we focusing that reason that much earlier because of graduation?
Yes, just to make sure that we can have the graduation at Hendersonville High School. Beach has some activities in May. They have a spring football game. Hendersonville has a spring football game. Right now it's hard to let fans out there because there's, it's just, if you've been by there, it's just raised.
Okay, so it's not just graduation then, so there are other functions.
I know for sure Beach has a spring game. I think Hendersonville also has a spring game.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking, what happens if it rains on the day of graduation?
Never rains on graduation, so no. I would think that they would probably move graduation. That would be my recommendation to Dr. Sawyers.
Okay. So I'm just thinking, for that amount of money,
Right.
we could move graduation
Right.
this year. I know that's not popular, but I feel like there are some schools who actually do their graduations in other places other than their school. That's just my thought, is
Right.
that's an awful lot of money to take a chance that we'll be moving it anyway with rain.
I feel pretty confident we'll have graduation outside, if at all, unless there's like some monsoon or something. I know. I just, I was operating the premise that our goal was to keep things as normal for our kids as
Right.
possible.
I would like that too. But that is a lot more than what we had originally
Right.
said.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Hawks. Mr. Lancaster?
What is the date currently for Hendersonville's graduation? I guess how much time do we have between May 3rd and their graduation day?
Let's see. May 17th.
May 7th, okay.
Yeah.
Second part of that question, so if we're saying July the 17th on the other scenario, is this just bleachers, or does this also, I know we're gonna have a press box, does this include the press box, or, I see nodding, I just want to make, so this does include the press boxes and things like that?
Yeah.
But also, part of me is thinking we want enough lead time to, this does not include bathrooms in places like, well, I know Beach needs bathroom facilities, right?
Yeah.
So, in other words, you gotta have these in place where you know where you're gonna put the bathroom, and that kind of thing. So there's some extra benefit besides just graduation, in my opinion, of having it.
I think, for instance, at Hendersonville, you have to set up the scoreboard, the jumbotron, the sound system. The disadvantage of taking those down and putting it back up is we'd have to hook all that stuff up, all that sound stuff, and then take it down and then put it back up in the fall. There's a cost associated with that because it's pretty specific wiring. I talked to the quarterback club president. The quarterback club does that in Hendersonville. Talked to them, so I think they would prefer to do it once instead of twice. Portland will have actually Mr. Brown's team has knocked it down. They're pouring the cement now, so we'll have a new bathroom facility at Portland. That's taken care of. Hendersonville's bathrooms are good. So really it's figuring out exactly where we're going to put the beach bathrooms, and that's not included in this price.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. Mr. King?
Yeah, so the weekly rental extensions.
Mhm.
So that's should the team go into the playoffs, we're gonna, that price, the 22,000 is for that team, or let's say they, I don't know. So that would be a per week thing. If they lose, then we don't have to pay for another week. If they
Right.
win, we pay for another week, and so on. So if all three teams make it into the playoffs and they make it all the way, or well, I'm just, so your recommendation is we go ahead with 4, we're going to extend. Are those going to be available to extend should we need it?
Yes, sir.
They
Yes,
will
sir.
be available.
Yeah, and I think that, Originally, in the first run, in the first three scenarios, it included the bleachers all the way through to the state semifinals.
Okay.
But then you've got those bleachers occupying the space. We want to be able to break ground on the new stadiums as soon as the last home football game. So that could, depending on if teams make playoffs, that could be as soon as, like the last week of October. So if they come pick them up on November 1st, then we're fine. But, having them sitting there until the end of November, we'd be at the mercy of whenever, because, these companies are big logistics companies. They're going to roll trucks in whenever it's convenient for them.
Okay. So scenario one is just, it's like, it just assumes all three teams are going to use all of their playoff weeks. Yeah, and even if they won, you're not guaranteed. Like the districts and regions flip, so you're not guaranteed. It's very rare that you would get 5 games at home. Okay.
I mean, if we win 3 state championships, I think everybody will be fine with the extension on the bleachers. So.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to be clear. So the difference between scenario 4 and the prior scenarios is, in those prior ones, we would set up for graduation, but then we'd tear down and ship off, and then have to get them back and set them back up. Is that?
There was one that just had, it was like scenario 4, but it was until the end of November.
How long does it take to set these bleachers up?
It's about 2 days, Chris. It's fast.
They allow like 2 to 3 days to set them up per location.
Okay.
So when they come here to set up, if we get them all at the same time, they'll be here for a week setting them all up.
And that's our maintenance team that does that?
No, that's if we purchased them.
Okay.
If we purchase them, those are like the 10 row that we would purchase. We would have to put those together. These are done by the company. Like they bring a crew in, they set everything up. When they did it at Beach and White House this year, it's remarkably fast.
So in scenario 4, would we be paying for 2 months of bleachers that we're not using?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Ms. Andrews?
Do we know how many students are seniors at HHS this year, approximately? How many seniors are at HHS this year?
Yeah, well, I think it's around 350.
And then on the bleachers, how many will they seat? Do you know that, Mr. Harrison?
It's around 2,500, I think, Mr. Brown. Or Mr.
The home side will sit 1,688. They're identical to what we got this last year.
I didn't know what the number was.
Yeah, 1,688, and they are reinforcing the sections for the students and band if we so choose to set them both up there.
Okay, so looking at this, yeah, that's what I was, definitely gone back and forth and looked at different, and try to break it down and breaking down numbers. And I will say one of the things that I personally missed, with scenario 5, looking at it and weighing, is that for that May 3rd to May 20th, it's just the home side. So if Mr. Harrison's saying that the home side that we're going to set up at HSS is only going to have 1,600, and we have 350.
75, 80 and 75.
So 375, they get approximately 4 tickets. And I know alone at Beach going to, or when they use Long Hollow, they get at least 6. How many are on the visitor side, did you say?
1,000, Chris.
$572.
How many, Chris?
572.
572.
So that would really put them about what the other schools would have as far as if you
Yeah.
handed out tickets. I know there's
Right,
also
right.
additional room at HHS, and kind of I think maybe part of the tradition is standing along the track or so.
Yeah, they put chairs on the track, and then that people, of course, there's people lined on the fence as well.
I will say, from day one, the question I've asked is about HHS graduation. We can say a lot about football. Football is a huge part of high school. Listen, I love high school and college football. In the NFL, I'm a little iffy on, but I love the community of it, the sportsmanship of it, and I know we want to strive and do everything we can, but traditions and graduation in some ways are sacred. And this is coming from a beach girl talking about HHS, but community is community, and I know that that's special to them. And so, you know, I think with that in mind alone would make me understand more for the scenario 4 that we would allow them to have as close to normal for graduation. Graduation is it's a big deal, and they actually have had it in the rain before. I do know that I think it was a couple of years ago, and they may have had a delay, maybe either when it started or they may have tried to get it earlier or something.
Mr. Connor called 150 names in about 14
Right,
minutes.
I was like, I do know that in recent years that it has rained.
We did.
But there's tradition, and so I do think that that's something that needs to be considered when we're looking at these numbers. That the price on the scenario 5, it does only include the home side.
Yeah. And I think to go back to Mr. Graham's question about them sitting. I mean, the thing is like there's still a tremendous amount of work to get done to get ready. So that's, you know, we just want to make sure that they're ready for the start. So I mean, it bothers me. You know, because it is a significant amount more, but we're talking about a significant amount more work than we've ever had to do to get ready. So I want to make sure that that takes place too.
Mr. Gregory?
Dr. Langford, I didn't understand about the press boxes. Will they be, will there be some new ones, some temporary ones for this coming year?
Yeah, yes, sir. So they're Chris, would you like to, let's say they're kind of a wooden storage building that's, what do you know the dimensions on it, Chris?
Sure. They're going to be a 12 by 16. It's a single slope, so it'll just have the roof slanting back. They'll have 3 windows at the front, a door on the side, obviously for access. Those will actually be on the next board agenda for approval. I've got to bid out right now. We're going to be purchasing 7 all total. 2 will be on each home side, and then the visitor side at Beach will have 1. So rough estimate, we're looking at around $50,000, but I don't know for sure until I get the bids back.
And those we will own. So after football season, we will have those to use. They can be used as concession stands. They could be used as you know, storage facilities, dressing facilities. Like they have a lot of they'll have a lot of usage, and we will have those after we're done. And we definitely have the need for 7 of those around the county.
That all, Mr. Gregory?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. King?
Yeah, I'm just curious about scenario 5. Scenario 5. So Beach in Portland. Do they need bleachers in May, like May 3rd, if we were to set them up? What? Are there events that they would get used for? Like, do we know of anything that's going on with, like, you know, that there might be using that, you know, that will require, you know, people sitting in stands to watch a sporting event?
Beach has their spring football game, I think, around May 10th.
Okay.
Schools have different events in May. I don't have a list offhand, but I know that there's a spring game at Beach. Portland does not. My concern for Portland, one, it costs more. Is that right, Chris? If you stage Portland at a different time.
That's correct. Scenario 6 shows Beach and Hendersonville being staged in May and then waiting on Portland until July. And it is actually higher than scenario 4.
Because they're having to bring crew in, separate crew and separate trucking of the bleachers.
So, but I'm just saying, it looks like if in scenario 5, if we set up bleachers for Beach, Hendersonville, and Portland, we're guaranteed to have those. Is that
Right.
correct? So we would have
Yes.
those. So the question mark there is, we'll set them up for Hendersonville May 3rd, take them down May 20th after graduation, right?
Are you talking about scenario 5?
5, uh-huh.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
So then, so they go away May 20th, so then you got 2 months of whether we don't have them.
Mhm.
Is there a guarantee we'll be able to get those back?
You would get bleachers back, but probably wouldn't be the same ones.
Absolutely. So when we make a decision, they're going to put these on hold, earmarked for us. I've explained the situation where we have to go to the county commission, we have to get approval, so they know that April will be the earliest that we can issue a purchase order and make the commitment, the full commitment. But they will earmark those for us. Once they do that, those are ours at those times. They'll have them earmarked for us.
Okay. And so, but is there an advantage, I think you mentioned this, where you said it would, like, if we do have them in May, like in scenario 4, we're gonna have them in May all the way through the summer,
Yes, sir.
wouldn't have to tear them down, reset them, and the cost value of that, I mean, what was the advantage to that? It was, number one, it was, we were guaranteed to have them. They're there, they're set up, ready to go. Is there other things that, I guess, in preparation for, the sporting season coming up, that would those bleachers get some attention during that time? Or are they just gonna sit there in the elements for 2 months until?
But they're gonna check them to make sure that they're. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. King. They're gonna check them to make sure that they're okay. They check them periodically, I think every week or two during the season. So they're gonna check them. I think it's a little different for each stadium. For Beach and Hendersonville, you've got an extensive amount of other electrical equipment, like running jumbotrons, running sound,
Right.
different things like that. We're talking about the cost of having to set that up and break that down twice. We're also setting about, like, making sure we've got adequate space for cheer and band and everything like that. Portland, the extra part in Portland is making sure, because we lost that one light pole, we're going to have to figure out some way to do temporary lighting there. I would prefer not to have to sit there, because the old stadium, that one light was basically connected to the stadium, so when we took the stadium down, that light had to come down. So I'd like to be able to go ahead and figure out where we can put that lighting to make sure that we've got that covered. I don't know that that will be an instantaneous thing. We'll have to run, Andy's team will have to run power to make sure they've got power to each of these press boxes. And, so there's some different things like that. What's the value of that? I don't know, but if you stage and then tear down, you got to do it twice.
I'm just saying, it just sounds like
Right.
it's a gamble. You set it up once, you get it the way you like it, tear it down, have to set it up again.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like,
And I think too, when you're talking about sensitive sound equipment, video equipment, stuff like that, you're running the risk of damaging it every time you hook it up and break it and tear it down.
I'm just wondering if those 2 months, if there would be work being done to, in and around the bleachers, staging them or getting,
Yeah.
in preparation for the
Right.
athletic season.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
I would like to have everything done as soon as possible, just so we know it's done. It's over.
Peace of mind.
Peace of mind.
Yes.
Confidence of the community. I think the thing is, like, I don't want to speak. If I take Beach, for instance, I've had to call twice and say, once when the bleachers initially fell, and then when we found out we weren't getting stadiums. Like, I love our parents and people, and it's tough to tell them that they're not going to have something. If we can, there's something to be said tangibly for being able to see in a community that these bleachers are here and they're going to be here for us
Yeah,
to stay.
the thing that's on my mind is, when we were getting rental bleachers before, it was one set of bleachers they brought, and then I don't remember what happened, but they ended up like in Mississippi,
Mhm.
and when we were supposed to get them, or I don't know, but stuff like that, logistics. I'm just
They jumped the gun on the
I'm
bid.
concerned about. I mean, I understand. I'm what the wheels are spinning in my mind is, okay, we got bleachers that are going to be sitting there,
Mhm.
accruing cost, but if we take them down, what if something happens? What if there's a tornado and they just the bleachers we had slated to come back.
We're in Minnesota or something and they're gone.
I mean, any act of God could happen, but I mean, I'm just,
Right.
I'm kind of leaning towards peace of mind. Let's get them done, get them set up, have it ready to go. I mean,
Yeah. I 100%.
That's where I'm at right
Yeah,
now.
I 100% agree. It's a lot of money, but I think there's also a tremendous amount of work to get done around the stadium complexes to make sure that they're ready to roll.
Thank you, Mr. King. Ms. Hawkins?
Okay, so in both scenario 4 and scenario 5, we have Hendersonville High School graduation on location.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. The only difference is that the bleachers will be taken down in scenario 5 and then brought back.
So we'll have the home side of Hendersonville in scenario 5, not the home and the visitor.
Okay. So do we have a scenario where, because that was a little confusing just from this, what you're showing me now, it just says July 17th to November 1st. But there is going to be a bleacher home side Hendersonville for graduation.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So on this scenario, the May dates with the bleachers at Hendersonville would just be the home side. The
Just-
July 17th through would be both home and visitor.
Okay, and that would probably only allow 4 people per graduate.
I think they'll probably go higher than that because Hendersonville puts a lot of chairs on the track. And then, go ahead. I'm sorry.
May I address this question, Chairman Brewer,
Yes.
to Ms. Hawkins? Hendersonville High School is outside, they do not limit, they don't give tickets, a limited number. Families come, and they sit on the visitor side. A lot of times the people can't get on the home side or in the seating. The seating on the track is for handicapped senior adults who can't do the steps as well and handicapped wheelchairs. But people sit on the visitor side at graduation as well because they do not limit tickets for graduation.
But won't they have to if we have limited seating?
Because there's usually 500-600 people on the fence and people sitting in both the end zones. There's a lot of, Hendersonville Stadium has lots of, they bring chairs and so.
Okay, so we're talking about a $500,000 difference between scenario 4 and scenario 5. And the difference is that in scenario 5, the bleachers are taken down and brought back. Of course, if they're just sitting there, a tornado could hit them there. There's not 100% guarantee that something won't happen to them while they're waiting to be used. So I just am trying to understand, that's $500,000
Right.
that we're talking about, and I'm just not seeing a $500,000 worth of difference.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins. Ms. Andrews?
Yes, thank you. I have to agree with you, Ms. Hawkins. When I came into the meeting, that's exactly where I was, that it's a lot of money. But I've had 2 realizations. One is the not including the visitor side at HHS. I know they bring chairs and stuff like that, but I do think having that access for people who maybe didn't realize they need to bring a chair, or family members with just extenuating circumstances, I do think that is important that they have home and visitor. The other thing that literally just dawned on me that I had to look up and realize is dead period for football ends on July 8th. As soon as July 8th hits, it is full steam ahead. So if we wait until July 17th before we're staging bleachers, I feel like that is going to be a disruption and be another issue within. I mean, again, we're not being able to have the stadiums, but then when they are coming back and are ready to be hot and heavy, so you go, okay, well, you can have it for a week, and then we're going to not be able to let y'all be there because obviously then there's some liability with staging. I think that realization makes me lean towards just let's get them there and have them and know they're there and not, you know, and then like, you know, Mr. Lancaster said, have them there and then we can say, okay, here's a space. Cheerleaders can come out and they can look and they can see where they're going to be. The dance teams can come out and look. Band. And then if there's additional accommodations that we need to take into account or just planning and logistics, it gives us more time to really think through that than continue with knee-jerk reactions.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Mr. Lancaster?
I actually agree with you, Sandra. The way I look at it is it's $100,000. It's $300,000 difference between scenario 3 and scenario 4. And I take that divided by 3. There's 3 schools. That's $100,000 a piece to have peace of mind that we're going to have these things in place, ready to go. So, you know, if we're waiting for somebody to make a motion, I would make the motion for scenario 4 and to amend I was going to combine them, but hey, I'll just make the motion for scenario 4 to start off with.
I second it.
Motion's been made, second. Is there any further discussion?
Which scenario did you say?
4. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. One no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is, put on my glasses. Discussion and interaction regarding amendments to the general purpose budget for HHS, PHS, PHS rental bleachers.
Computer's not working.
Motion to approve the reclass.
Computer stopped working.
I have it.
I think,
It's frozen.
Just so we'll know where we're at, do we have to make a motion?
Yeah, motion.
I didn't hear what happened, so I was.
So this is on the second part where it's the reclassing it from a capital to operating. I just motion to approve that.
Yeah, we're on B, discussion and interaction regarding the amendments to the general purpose budget for HHS, BHS, PHS rental bleachers. Motion's been made. Second by Mr. Lacy. Any discussion? Mr. King?
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify, since this is for renting bleachers, that is no longer capital, that's operational, so we need to move from our capital line to the operational budget, so that, that's gonna require a county commission.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons we need to go ahead and get this done, because we got to catch. We've already missed education and budget this month, but we want to make sure we've got. We wanted to go ahead and get the bids approved, and then that way it gives us the maximum amount of time to work with the county commission to get.
I just wanted to say that because a lot of times we'll vote on things and moving money around. I just want to make sure the public knows this. That's why.
Right. No new money.
Right. No new money. It's a capital, but we have to move it into operational.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. King. Any further discussion?
We have further discussion. You can just say,
We just want to make sure, we would like, so just what would you like to do, and I'll give you the number.
Yeah, so what we would like as part of Mr. Lancaster's motion is that we say the specific number, so of the amount.
Motion to approve 2.09021. You tell me what she said.
$2,021,720 for scenario 4.
Motion to approve two. This is why I tried to do it all into one motion. Motion to approve $2,021,799. It's 29. 720. I had a screen. I
It's clear as a bell.
From capital to operations.
All right, motion's been made.
Just get it right.
And you made a second, that's okay on that? Mr. Daniels?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Mr. King's comments a second ago. You know, when we moved the money originally, you know, the 15 million, one of the things we talked about is that, you know, it wasn't a blank check. It wasn't something that just came over here and could just be used, you know, for whatever without any oversight. And this is part of that oversight. So all these projects that we've talked about, all the projects that you've shared with us, the things that we want to do, the bleachers, the stadiums, the tracks, all of that does have to come back in front of us as those bids come in, and be accepted, money moved as needed. And so this is just the accounting piece that ties back into the money that was moved back in late October, early November. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Ms. Andrews?
So, quick question, since there is on this scenario, the weekly rental extension as well option,
We won't need to move that because that would be made in November, if that's needed. So in November of next year, we would need to approve, or I guess October,
We
approve it
we
if
would
it
just,
happens.
we would just build into the budget for next year, enough flexibility to cover those.
okay, I didn't know if there needed to be some type of clause or something to make sure we cover that portion of it.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is discussion and interaction regarding the approval of school nutrition capital purchases. Motion approved by Ms. Wise, second by Mr. Lancaster. He beat you just about a little bit, Mr. Gregory. Any discussion? Mr. King?
Yeah, I'm just curious. This is the expense here. It looks like, well, over $2 million here. What line is this coming out of, or what? I'm just curious.
This is out of the school nutrition capital line.
School nutritional capital.
So school nutrition, just to give you a little background on where the reserve came from, during COVID, the government paid for meals for anybody that ate. So our number of meals consumed went up exponentially. At the same time, our labor force dropped. So sometimes you had two people, like at Jack Anderson, I think we had two people running the entire cafeteria for a while. So we built this reserve that won't be there. It's artificial because at the time, what the government was doing in terms of paying for lunches and then our employees. So anyway, if you deal with school nutrition, and Dawn is here to answer if we need her, if you deal with school nutrition, there are 8.2 million rules on what you can spend money on. On everything. And so one of the things that we can do is make capital purchases. And so what they have done is they've done an extensive study. Some of the capital equipment that they're going to be replaced has been in the cafeteria since the 1950s and 60s. So this is a significant upgrade that's coming out of we built this big reserve. Capital purchases for cafeterias are one of the things we can use it on. And if we go ahead and move, the reason it's on a special call is that they've just gotten the plan done. They've been working on this for 5 or 6 months to get it ready. And if we do it now, it gives us the maximum amount of time to get this equipment purchased and in before the end of the budget year.
And also, just as a side note, Dawn can add to this too, because of the function of school nutrition, they're not supposed to carry a large balance, so the state actually wants them to spend that reserve balance and on very specific things, especially investments back into our cafeteria. So we are trying to spend that fund balance down per the state too.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Mr. Graham?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have 2 quick questions, and they can be brief answers. How will this, A, make things easier for our nutrition staff, and B, how will this increase the quality of the food we're serving?
Good afternoon, evening. Dawn Botensten, School Nutrition Director. So because of the efficiency that we're working at right now, our quality of food will be better because we're using new technology. We have equipment that just doesn't work very well. So this will be a huge improvement on our quality. It'll also, I got so excited I forgot what I was going to say. So school nutrition it will make our staff more efficiently because we will have the better equipment. And then, I don't remember the second question.
So yeah, it was how will it benefit our staff, make things easier for them, and then how will it better quality? So as far as like quality, is that like a temperature issue, like keeping cold things cold better,
Absolutely.
warm things warm better?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then does it remove steps in the process for our staff to make them more efficient?
So because it's more of location of where we would place the equipment, some of the schools are they're not very efficient. So there's some pieces of equipment that are, here's the serving line, and then the ovens are on the other side of the kitchen. So we want to centrally locate these pieces of equipment so that they have more of an efficient time in
Yeah.
moving around
So
the kitchen.
fewer steps from one to the other,
Literally.
fewer distance, yeah, okay.
Literally.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Any further discussion? We made a motion in a second. Yeah, we had a motion. I'm sorry, Mr. Lacy.
I know some of them are cheaper than the others. Is there a reason why we prefer the one in Mobile over the other ones? I know you said some didn't include walk-in freezers.
Right, so Mobile Fixtures was chosen because they have a really great reputation of customer service. And that if I know that in a year from now, we're having a problem with a steamer, I can call them outside of the warranties and they'll come and help me fix it.
Thank you, Mr. Lexi. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is discussion and interaction regarding bids for HVAC cooling tower repair at Jack Anderson Elementary School. Motion to approve by Mr. Lancaster, second by Mr. Gregory. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item, discussion and interaction regarding bids for Station Camp High School gym floor. Motion approved by Mr. Lancaster, second by Mr. Daniels. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. That concludes the special called meeting, so it is adjourned. Would you like to take 5 minutes recess? Or do you want to keep going? Want to just keep going? All right, let's go. Next item on the agenda is study session, Liberty Creek Sewer update. Dr. Langford.
Yeah, this will be really quick. So we worked, I appreciate the Planning Commission. You know, they had some questions when the plat was deferred in February. I emailed Mr. Klein and they were willing to do a special call meeting. However, you know, so when the engineers made the changes and answered the questions requested by the Planning Commission, it had to go back through White House Utility District for their approval. So by the time that all got done, we were within 2 days of having the regular March Planning Commission. So we're on spring break that week anyway. So we're gonna, you know, hopefully the Planning Commission, it will clear. I've received pretty good assurances that they're good with everything. So hopefully if it passes, then we'll be able to go ahead and get the contractor set up. Hopefully we can get that done over spring break. But I'll, as soon as I get a firm date, you know, of course it'll still be dependent on passing the Planning Commission. But I'll email everybody as soon as we get the final thing, the final date on it approved. But we're really close, and y'all, it's I want to give a shout out to Andy Brown's team because they've done yeoman's work over the last 2 years, making sure that Liberty Creek's toilets functioned and the sewer capacity was taken care of. So his crew is very happy and ready to be done. We're about ready to have a mutiny if we don't get this done. So we are ready to put this one to bed.
All right. No further discussion on that. We'll move next to discussion and our discussion regarding draft policy 6.2001, high school final exam exemptions prior to first reading. Dr. Langford.
Yes, we have, you know, I think Mr. Graham, you asked last time to hear from some high school principals. So we couldn't get them all here, but I think 4 is a pretty good turnout. So, so we have Mr. Duffer, Dr. Woods, Dr. Miller, and Dr. Holt. So I'm guessing, I don't know if one of you would like to share, or if y'all have any questions for the principals. I think, Dr. Miller, you brought handouts?
While we're waiting on the handouts, I'll give a shout out to Mr. Brown again for the great job on the air conditioner in this building.
Yeah.
It is working very well. I didn't bring enough Coke tonight.
What's that? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you just go right over there.
So they're just passing those around. I talked to Mr. Wise briefly after our last principals meeting. This was brought to the attention of the principals of needing a uniform policy for the district. While I understand that and actually fought on that camp several years ago because exemption policies are an easy way to believe that you can increase attendance and engagement with students. Sadly enough, in the last couple of years, I've realized it does not. There is no research on anywhere that you can find showing that exemption policies improve chronic absenteeism or student engagement. I actually wanted to do a project on it in one of our doctoral classes, and I ended up not doing it because there's literally no research stating that it's effective. And so that's our main thing: get our kids to school, keep them safe, and teach them. So when we talked about this, a couple of things that I just pulled the chronic absenteeism numbers for the nation, the state, the county, and for White House in particular. That's where I am, White House High School. And again, just there are two different policies there. So I just wanted to bring that up, that in 2022-23, our exemption policy was almost verbatim what they presented to you guys as a proposed policy for exemptions. I know that was met with some mixed reviews, and understandably, I get it. I still have yet to pose the question, what harm comes to a student from taking a final exam? No one can answer that question for me. I advocate that we have high expectations. I think the board actually asked to put state test scores as part of the superintendent, contract. I get it, accountability is high. We want high accountability, but with that, we have to have high expectations. We have 180 days in a school year. And out of those 180 days, we expect that every day is instructionally driven and every day is important for student engagement. And when we have exemptions, that's not the case. That's not the reality. That's not the boots on the ground. That's not what happens in your school buildings. So I advocate that the exemption policy, if you want to pursue a consistent one across the county, is that we don't exempt. We're being held accountable for the idea that they master the content, and part of mastering the content is sitting for the exam. I ask that most of you either work for a company, own a company. Some of you work on your own. We had a big gathering of community members that asked for higher interpersonal skills and higher accountability for our young people. So I want to ask, which person do you want to hire? Do you want to hire the person who's going to do the bare minimum to get out of the final thing? Or do you want to hire the person who's competent, well-rounded, and shows up and does the things that they're expected to do? So I'll just share a little bit of our personal story at White House High School. So our exemption policy in 2023 mirrors the one that we proposed to the board, or that the principals came up with. This year we moved to no exemptions at all. That's the reason that's written in the handout that we gave you. That's all research-based. That's what you can find if you look up exemption policies and student achievement and chronic absenteeism. And just the results that we've had, while it is a very, very small sample set, from fall of 22 to fall of 23, I just asked my attendance clerk, I said, can you tell me what my number of chronically absent students was in 22 and 23? So in 2022, there was 290, which is still way too many, students that were chronically absent at White House High School. So that's 5 or more at the semester. And then in 2023, when there was no exemptions offered at all, it was almost cut in half to 140. Now, I can't say that's the only reason. Our team works really, really hard to get kids there, build relationships, and have high expectations. But it definitely shows that exemptions don't cut down chronic absenteeism, or we wouldn't have a problem, guys, because we've had exemptions forever. Chronic absenteeism has been around forever. So that's kind of one of the most, I think, astonishing results that we got at White House High School. There's not a whole lot of research out there because there aren't very many. It's not popular to not exempt. It's not a fun thing, but again, they don't exempt in college. We're preparing our kids for the next level. The other piece that I thought was interesting, if you look at the two calendars, these are actually our testing calendars from White House High School for the fall and the spring. These are mandated by the state. We have to give the test in the window that they give to us. So a lot of people say we test them to death. I don't disagree, but there are certain things in our world that we don't have the privilege of changing, which is our testing windows. So if we look at the fall, if you look at instructional days, so after our state test is given, if the last day of the semester was December 20th, you have 13 and a half days of instruction for English after the test is done, 7 and a half for math, 12 and a half for biology, and 10 and a half for U.S. history. Those are instructional days after the Tennessee state test is given, in which we are expected to bring students in, keep them engaged, teach them material, and have them assessed in some shape, form, or fashion by the end of the semester. Fall looks bad enough, but if you'll turn to the next one and look at spring. Spring semester, after the English test is finished, we have 26 and a half days of instruction left. Math, we have 20 and a half. Biology, we have 23 and a half. U.S. history, we have 24 and a half days. We have a month of instruction left after we take our state exams. And we are asking teachers to come and engage students. And we don't want apathy, and we want kids to show up. If we don't have final exams to show that they've mastered that content, there's no real way to hold them accountable for that learning. The other piece of it is we struggle to keep classified staff in. And if you've ever been in a school, when you do block by block exemptions for 850 kids in our case, you will lose an attendance clerk and a bookkeeper in a heartbeat, because for one, we are checking in, checking out, kids are on the roads, kids are back and forth, we're taking notes. It's hard to keep your attendance accurate during those days, which is why we went with the all or none. You either meet the criteria of expectations and are exempt, or you do not, and you take all your exams to prevent students from moving in and out of those buildings during exam days. The other piece that no one can give me a great answer to is we are held accountable for the attendance, and if they're exempt, do you count them present or do you count them absent? So if you ask us to count them present because they were exempt, then a kid, let's say Mr. Wise is my student, and he comes in, he's counted present, he goes out and does Lord knows what, gets in a car wreck. We have now legally, easy now. We have legally counted him present at a school with the state policy of saying 180 days is important. If you count them absent, that affects, ultimately we're telling kids not to come to school, which is to me a poor message. And then we're going to lose, it's going to affect funding and things like that, or chronic absenteeism in our attendance. So to me, we want high expectations. We want kids to come to school. The expectation is that we're raising kids that do the things because that's what you do. So my suggestion, just personally, is that we don't exempt, and we continue to hold our students to a high expectation. We get them to school every day for 180 days that you guys say are important. We keep them safe, and then we teach them. And that's my recommendation. So just wanted you guys to have some facts and see where we were coming from. And any questions, I'd be happy to answer or let other principals speak.
Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Miller, I think I heard you say, and I know I heard you say when you and I met and discussed this, one simple element of this, if I'm her student, I'm exempt from chemistry. It's crazy to take it anyway, but I'm exempt from chemistry, and I go through the front office and I'm gone. I'm out. I'm in the world. If she has to count me as present, and I go to Sonic, and I get in trouble with the law at Sonic, and the law says, well, the school says he was in school because the principal said he was in school, and her records show that he was in school. But I'm actually at Sonic breaking the law. So, and what I'm hearing is, if we do one thing, we're going to ask our administrators to lie. It's just bare face, We're going to ask them to lie. If we allow for an exemption policy and they have to show me present when I'm not even in the building, I'm not even on campus, I'm breaking the law at Sonic. So I just wanted to point that out. I just assume we don't have a policy that forces our administration to lie. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wise. Well, y'all was right on the money, but I think I saw Ms. Hawkins first.
I'll yield it.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Well, I have to agree. I'm especially if there's no evidence that the reason that we're doing exemptions is to encourage attendance. And if that is not happening, then honestly, I don't think, even if it did work, I would not be in favor of it. And here's why. School is a privilege. if we treat it like it's a prison, a punishment you can get out of, instead of an opportunity of a lifetime that's being presented to these students by this community, by these taxpayers paying for you to go to school. I grew up in the Chattanooga City public schools in the 1970s. And if I didn't go to school, my parents got in trouble. There was no exemption at all. I took my exams. And I tell you what, it really made a difference when I got to college. And all three of my children went to college, and they all three were exempt from their exams in high school. And each one of them told me, Mom, you didn't do me any favors. That did not do me any favors when I got to college, because I was hit by these massive exams that I was not prepared for. I feel like exemptions is, in a way, the tail wagging the dog. We are offering something of huge value to these students, and to have to lure them with treats seems wrong to me. Now, I may be unpopular about that, I may sound old-fashioned, but I feel like school is an opportunity to sharpen your sword, to be prepared for the real world. And part of that is taking a test at the end of the course and showing what you've learned. Even if you're the best student in the class, even if you were in school every single day, that's what you're expected to do anyway. It's not something extraordinary, it's what you're expected to do. So I'm not in favor of exemptions in any form or fashion.
And seniors coming back and telling us that they were ill-prepared for college was a big push for me as an administrator to examine our exemption policy 3 years ago. We had handfuls of students come back and say, I wasn't prepared. And that wasn't just at a four-year university, that was at Ball State, that was at tech school, that was sitting for a real estate exam, that was anything you have to do in society. You've got to learn to persevere through the curriculum, sit for the exam, whether you have test anxiety or not. You can't get the job. I can't hire you. And so that was really a really hinge point for our team when we have our kids come back and say, you didn't do your job, you didn't prepare me for what I was about to go into. That's not okay. So again, just I agree, and I urge if there is a policy that it's definitely not the one that was proposed in the original document.
Ms. Hawkins, Mr. King?
Yeah, I'm just going back to this whole counting students present when they're not actually present.
Sure.
So in 2022-23, that was the policy at White House. You guys were, so they would be exempt, and then you would mark them present. But
It's always been a gray area as to what you do. You're telling the kid not to come to school, so they can't be penalized on attendance as far as whether you count them there or not. And that'll count against us if we count them absent.
Mark them absent?
Some do, some don't.
What do you mean some do, some don't? Some teachers don't mark them absent, or the?
That's exactly correct.
Because I mean,
it's hard to take attendance in those days. Do you count them absent? You told them not to come. Are they exempt? So we have a list of exempt students, but overarchingly, I think most schools count them present when they're exempt.
So when
to not count against their attendance.
When the school-wide attendance is logged, I'm not talking about per classroom, are those students marked absent? Were they marked absent?
If they were exempt, they were marked absent. I mean, they were marked present, and then the exemption list was there showing that they were exempt.
Well, what I'm asking is that, were they marked absent? If they're exempt, were they marked absent?
No.
They were marked present?
Yes.
So on the attendance log for the whole school-wide attendance log, that day, you had students logged, they were exempt from the exam, they didn't show up, but we marked them present.
Because we told them not to come. We told them, you don't have to come on this day, you're exempt.
Okay, so they're not, so they wouldn't get an absence.
Right.
Okay. I'm just curious about other school, thank you for that. I would like to find out what other schools that have done the same thing, what they've done.
I think that's pretty common
in that situation. So
pretty common across the district.
I'd love to give you another side of this, and maybe it'll clear up a few things.
Well, I didn't know if she was done or if other board members had other questions for her.
Other board members got other questions.
Yeah, we'll absolutely tag team it. And here's the thing that I would say: what she said is accurate. but it's accurate for White House High School. In 1993, I traveled to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, after Gene Stallings and the Alabama Crimson Tide had just beat Miami for a state championship. And as I sat there with about 5,000 other high school coaches, I remember Coach Stallings looking out and asking this question. He said, "What is the best high school offense that you can possibly run?" And he asked 5 questions from 5 different people, and they gave 5 different answers. And he looked at us and he said this, "You're right." And someone said, "Who's right, Coach?" And he said, "All of you are right. There's no perfect offense that fits everyone." So I'm here to say that she is a fantastic administrator and she runs a really good school. I could say the same thing about Mr. Woods back there, and I could say the same thing about Dr. Holt. But if you ask us how we arrive at that and how we run effectively a high school, we're going to give you different scenarios. And I'm going to tell you this. There's probably no statistics or data that will show you that proms make a better high school, but we have proms. We could say a lot of things about morning break, and I think all of us have morning break within our school. That is a privilege. It's not a right, it's a privilege. We offer these privileges not because in and of themselves they bring about a desired outcome in and of itself, but we leverage off of it to arrive at something greater than itself. The state itself is looking at stepping back away from some of the summative exams or summative tests that we are doing, and the number of tests that we're going to be giving and students are going to be required to complete in the coming years are going to be much smaller than what we are currently doing. We test students formatively, which step by step, day by day, week by week, month by month, and we determine by the end of the term what that student has achieved or what they've not achieved, based on formative incremental tests. And if a student has scored well along the way, A's, B's, all B's, we make a determination. The final exam doesn't give us the greatest indication of student success or failure. We at Westmoreland High School, I think Dr. Woods at Portland does something similar to what we do, and we exempt students, provided they've got good attendance, provided they've not had severe discipline, and provided they've not missed school excessively. Now, I'm telling you right now, we have students. One of my former students is sitting over there. I'm quite certain he was exempt. I'm quite certain he went to college and he performed very well. We've got numerous students who have graduated from Westmoreland High School, gone on to major universities, gone on to Vanderbilt and various other places, and we exempt those students provided they did not miss school excessively, they did not get into severe trouble and have discipline, and they were able to maintain an A average. The same thing with our morning break. We give a 15-minute break between first and second block. In and of itself, it brings no academic value whatsoever. But if students in the morning, leaving the hallway, going to first block, leave trash in the hallway, and we say to them, "You left too much trash in the hall, there were potato chip bags here, there." If we say that and we take that break the next day, you can eat off the floor on Wednesday, because that gets their attention, and we leverage off of it. I'm passionate about this because I can tell you over the past 14 years at Westmoreland High School, we've leveraged greatly and we've gotten great results out of this. Now, as far as how you record the absence, there's a variety of ways that that can be done. If a football team qualifies for a playoff game and they leave at 10 o'clock in the morning, even though they're not in second block, third block, or fourth block, we don't count those students absent. And they're not actually in class there. They're not absent, they're excused. So up until that point, okay, if a student has not missed excessive days and they don't have 5 absences, then what we do is we excuse those absences during the exam time as an incentive for academic achievement, good behavior, and regular attendance. Again, the way Ms. Miller does it and the results she gets at White House, fantastic, I applaud her. But it's different from the way that Dr. Woods does it, and he gets the results. At the end of the day, I'm saying this. We're not supposed to look exactly like each other. We're not supposed to do it the same way because we're different people, different philosophy to some degree, with a different approach. But if the results are happening, and we're a school in the eyes of the state, or whatever we may be, if we're getting the results and it's not broken, respectfully I say to you, let's not fix it. Let's not change it. Okay? Give us the latitude, give us the autonomy, and give us the opportunity to consider the total package of what we do and not one aspect only. The sun doesn't rise and set on exemptions, but it is a part of what we do at Westmoreland High School and leverage against to get the results for our students that we're trying to get. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Yeah, Mr. Graham was next, I think.
I can't follow that.
You had your life.
I was going to go back to the employment scenario when we're talking about, you know, when you have a job, you don't get an exemption from work. But, you know, there's a lot of positions where you could do average work and they'll give you a paycheck and you'll never be promoted and you won't get bonuses. Or if you know, do above average work, you do get bonuses, you do get promotions. And so, you know, in my heart, I still think that it encourages students to come to school on a micro level. Maybe you may not see massive numbers, but I'd be willing to bet the same students who are chronically absent also don't have A's and B's in those scenarios. But I would say that a final exam exemption is an incentive for being all around a great student, for being all around good with your behavior and ensuring that you're not violating the rules. We're always looking for ways to incentivize that and also maintain that A and a B. The school I went to, and this isn't in the policy I wrote, but it worked at our school, is if you had straight A's, you could be exempt from unlimited number of courses. But if you had any B's, you could only choose 2 courses. I always chose algebra and math because, as I've stated many times, math is not my love language. And so I would work very hard to achieve a B in math and get my A's in my other courses so that I could be exempt from that final exam in math, because it was more than likely that final, which would have, you know, weighed 20% of my grade, I would have not have scored very high, even though I would have done all the work throughout the year. I would have worked very hard on my homework. I would have worked very hard toward the quizzes. I would have worked very hard on the other tests. That grade could have dropped me down to a C. And then we're talking about scholarship opportunities that are gone. We're talking about admission opportunities to various universities that are gone. And so I think the reason I wrote this is because I want to, number one, give incentives to all students of Sumner County. But number two, as Dr. Miller also stated, the reason there's not a lot of good data is because everybody does this. In other systems that we compete with and our students compete with, they have system-wide exemption policies. And so to create equality for our students against those students and to create equality for our students amongst one another, that's why I thought a district-wide policy would be a good idea.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Ms. Andrews?
Yeah, one, I want to thank Ms. Miller for doing this handout. I love visuals, I love numbers, so definitely be processing this over the next few days. Couple of questions is when, like with the discipline, says no discipline, like when you're doing exemptions before, no discipline in Skyward, does that include detentions? I know detentions is included in our the draft policy that came about. And I would like to know kind of the thought on that. I totally support in-school and out-of-school suspension, but I feel like, you know, I know at my children's school you can get a detention if you're not wearing your name badge, you know, or, you know, or a dress code or something like that, that, especially the name badge, I'm like, that sometimes can be, an, you know, we all make mistakes. For something of that infraction to eliminate you from an exemption versus obviously something that's more severe. So
sure. So just to start with, whenever we rolled this out, we have to change the mindset. Exemptions or exams are not a punishment. Exams are something we do. It's something that we do because we have to master measuring, because we're held accountable. So that was where we started. The second piece is our discipline system is tiered. And so we have multiple chances as teachers don't give detentions, at least at White House High School. I can only speak to that. I'll let Mr. Dupper speak to his. So the piece that I agree with is we don't want students to be perfect. We want perfect effort. So there's tiered discipline where you get, after 3 tardies or after 3 badges or after, we don't give detentions on, we're gonna have warning conferences, we're gonna talk, we're gonna document, we're gonna speak to them like adults. The part that I somewhat disagree is I do think that details matter, and I do think that, again, it goes back to this is not a punishment. I had my own student was a freshman last year, my own daughter, had some health issues, missed a lot of school, wasn't exempt on that policy. It was the best thing for her because I needed to make sure that as a parent that she mastered the content. Did she, whine around a little bit? Sure, she's 15. But at the end of the day, it produced resilience that, no, you didn't choose to be sick, honey. You didn't choose to go to homebound. But this is okay. You're going to get up. You're going to study for this exam. You're going to do what we raised you to do. And you're going to do it well with your head held high. So that, to me, is more of a mentality. So agreed that the district as a whole needs to have high expectations. And I think Mr. Dupper has high expectations. I think everybody has high expectations. I think the problem is that when you get into the mindset, I think that what Mr. Graham said is dangerous. I think when you get into the stick and the carrot, if I have to hold a carrot out to get you to do it or beat you with a stick, I think that we're raising a generation of kids that I don't want to hire. So when I have kids go through White House High School or Westmoreland High School or W Creek, I want those kids to show up and do the things and have a high resilience for hard things, because that's what I want to hire. That's what I want to push out into the workforce. So we have conversations. Yeah, you forgot your badge. That's fine. Do you need me to print you a new one? Do you want to let me help you create an atomic habit plan where you don't forget 2 days in a row? We're absolutely not going to turn it into a punitive thing, because that's not real either. So it looks more like, I know that our HR department did some things on positive reinforcement. When employees do something good, write a nice letter and put it in their file. It mimics that mindset of, hey, we're going to definitely praise the positive, but taking an exam is not, it's not a punishment, guys. It's an expectation of the job.
Do y'all offer any exemptions at all at White House?
No, ma'am, not this year.
Seniors? Okay.
No, ma'am, not even seniors.
This was the first year that
Yes,
you've
ma'am.
done that? Okay. So it's probably too early to determine if test score, if you've seen an increase in ACT scores or something like that, because of obviously
Sure.
you have almost half the number of chronic absenteeism in children, then it would be easy to assume that your ACT score would be reflective of that in a positive way.
I would hope so, and that's a year lag. Now, the one thing that I can tell you is we run failure reports every 4.5 weeks and send those out to remind. The 2 years our failure reports have gone down, and that's just any student that's failing any class at any period in the semester. Those are incrementally going down as well, so it's not smoke and mirrors like they're coming to school but they're still failing. You want all of those optics and all those metrics to be positive. So we're looking at it from a holistic standpoint. Our discipline's down. We don't send students to R.T. Fisher. If we send them, they're not returning. This is a whole big thing that we're looking at, but it's a mindset. It's an absolute mindset that this is the expectation, and I have had kids come back and thank me. Thank you so much for this opportunity, for making me do this thing, because that's why you have parents, because kids don't want to do much of anything that's not fun. So I'll let Mr. Dupper speak to that as well.
I think you asked a question regarding discipline, and we too, our policy is our policy. I think one of the worst things we did, and we did this years ago, and again, we did it incrementally, but when we started giving everyone a trophy, then the ones who actually earned the trophy did not get a trophy either. So if you miss 5 days, and it doesn't matter, and I'm not being facetious, I'm not trying to be charming or funny, I'm saying it. If you miss 5 days, you don't qualify. It doesn't matter if you were at a funeral, if you were in the hospital, it doesn't matter. You miss 5 days. Again, I echo her sentiment. It's not punitive. It's not something we're doing because we don't like you and we want to be mean. You missed 5 days. Part of the content taught in that class, you were not there for. Now, if a student can miss 15 days and still have an A in class, I'm having a conversation with my teacher, because obviously the rigor is not in the classroom that needs to be there. So we set it at 5 days. We set it with an A average, and we set it with, you may not have discipline that consists of in-school suspension, or out-of-school suspension. Yes, students get detentions because they're late. Students get detentions because they do minor things that probably you and I truthfully do on a regular basis. It's just a reminder, and it is an incentive. So when we offer those students that incentive, if we drive the speed limit and we don't get any tickets or anything like that, they incentivize us through our insurance company and they give us a refund or they give us this. Incentives are all over the place. So I don't think offering incentives for good behavior or to get results, I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think having students work for something rather than just be given it, I think that's a better way for us to do it. But the thing that we tie it to specifically the forms of discipline, ISS and OSS.
Okay. I will say I agree with both of you. One of my favorite books that I've read I think I read it last year, may have been 2 years ago, is Coddling of the American Mind. It is very eye-opening. I recommend it as a read specifically for middle school and high school parents. The Coddling of the American Mind. So good. And I think it hits on a lot of the points of raising expectations for students. The other question that I have, very eye-opening to see the numbers broken down of the instruction day specifically in the spring. I mean, I knew there was a lot, but to see it broken down that way is very eye-opening. Question is for no exemptions in giving the exams. Do you also require your teachers to have their like regular course grades all in prior to the exam?
Yes, ma'am. Grades should be accurate weekly. So grades should be all in and accurate weekly because we can't ask you to monitor progress if it's not accurate. So yes, that's an expectation that we have with our teachers. We also don't require every exam to be cumulative. A lot of our final exams are just chapter tests over the material that they cover from the testing window to the end, because we have a lot of material to cover, especially in the spring, and you can't get through all of that. So projects, speeches, presentations, group things, chapter tests, things like that. So if you're a tested subject, they're not going to give another cumulative exam at that stage in the semester, but it is assessing the material that you're covering from the end of the testing window to the end of the semester. But yes, ma'am, the kids know. That was the really big problem with the old school policy, I call it, of like an A and 2, like, those. I'm telling y'all, please, I beg you, go visit a school that exempts on these days and look at your front office staff. It's a nightmare.
Right, oh no.
And it's not safe because we're not keeping accurate records because it's impossible. Have you ever walked into a high school where there's 250 kids waiting to check out? And then you're trying to vet, was that really your mom that called? Was it your sister that called? Like, we've had so many incidents that could have turned out terribly when the kid just should have been sitting in class taking a test. Correct. It's literally not that hard. So that was really, I mean, our classified staff, that was what moved us to the all or none, because we run one report and it says, here are your students that meet the criteria and are exempt from all 4 exams. Here are the students that do not meet the criteria and are taking all 4 exams. So they're there for the whole day. They're not calling in and out in the middle of, I'm a slow test taker, I take the full 90 minutes, but the guy finishes at 45 minutes next to me and they're buzzing in every 5 seconds. These are the things that are real in a school building, that when you have a district policy that, like Mr. Depper said, we all have different needs. We all have different student dynamics, and I'm all about equity, but fairness doesn't exist. If you're looking for fair, you're gonna look long and hard and be real tired because it ain't out there. So that's my thing. I think we're all doing really good things with really good intentions. It's going to be impossible to write a policy if you want to be equitable. It's not going to be equitable. That's just the way that I see it, boots on the ground. But I would just encourage you to speak with your individual principals and visit those buildings. Go see it for yourself. It's pretty miraculous some days. So I'll let Mr. Dupper speak to that.
Everything that we're talking about are real situations with real consequences. She talked about in and out of class, in the middle of class. Our policy is this: if you sit for an exam in first block, you're there when the bell rings at first block. There's no early dismissal. And can it be chaotic? Absolutely. If you've got 600, 700, 800 students in high school, you better believe it can get chaotic. But we manage it. We have policies, we have procedures, and we follow those. And we do have decorum, and we do provide and maintain a level of sanity that works for everyone. But it's like everything else we do. There has to be a process. Someone has to be in charge of that process, and you have to manage the students involved in that process. But again, I say, every one of the principals here have a great school, and we get great results, and we do it differently. If a policy is necessary, please give autonomy and flexibility to the principal, because again, the sun doesn't rise and set on the exemption policy. It is merely a piece within all that we do. One piece, but it's an important piece for me, and it does matter to our students and our teachers, and we manage it well. With that being said, please consider those things.
Okay, I have one last question. In this policy that we have, it says students eligible for exemption may still be permitted to take a final exam. A parent or legal guardian of any student may also require by written request a student to take the final exam. Was there any discussion, and it has to be done no later than 5 days prior? I'm the mean parent who may have made my child take an exam even though they were exempt, but I made them go to school because it was an exam day and they were there and they were to take the exam because they came to school. So I was confused with that language, and I didn't know if there was a reason why that language was included in the way that it was.
If a student is exempt, in our situation, they must have an A average. Hypothetical situation, a student comes in, they have a low A, and they sit, they take an exam. It is possible, if that exam is averaged in, for the exam to hurt the student. They could bomb it, and it literally lower their grade. So you're right, you are a mean parent if you make your kid do that. I'm being sarcastic. There are some situations, however, where it is graduated scale. You can have a B and miss only this many days, a C and miss only this many days. For us, you got to have an A. So that's how we manage that. If you've got a C, obviously taking the exam could help you. So again, the dynamics of this would depend upon what the policy is and the student there. Does that answer your question?
No, because what it's saying here is that if they are exempt, but a parent wants them to take it, they can take it, but you have to give written
consent.
Yes, 5 days prior.
That wasn't in the policy that we suggested. I think that was in the original policy. I don't think that's necessary. I think if the student decides.
Yeah, it's right here.
The rest of it was already in policy.
Okay.
We got 3 before we get to you, Mr. Graham. You'll have to hold on.
I can respond directly to your question since I've authored the policy. I don't want to discuss anything. I just want to clarify for.
Go ahead.
Okay, that was original wording in my policy. It looks like that's being copied into the principal's policy as well, but I don't know that was their idea. That was, as far as the wording, I mean, that can be changed. It wasn't really a major requirement. I just wanted to make sure parents knew that they could force the kid to take a final per their prerogative.
That was not part of our draft. What we do is if a student wants to sit for the exam for whatever reason, to better their grade, to finish, we just allow them to do so. But we do tell them that in the year that we did exempt, if they took an exemption in this circumstance and it dropped their grade, we would work with them on that.
And we do the same thing there. We tell them, if it helps your grade, we will include it. If it hurts your grade, we will not.
Right, but that rarely happens. I don't know that I've ever had that. I've never had kids.
I was just curious about that specific language within that, but okay.
Mr. Lacy. Mr. Lacy.
Yeah, I've had a few questions for Mr. Duffer. Who is exempt? Just seniors or all high school students?
We offer that to all grade levels, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. They're all under the same requirements. You have to have an A, fewer than 5 absences, and no ISS or OSS.
And were you suggesting that we should not do a policy and just leave it up to the local schools?
I'm not going to tell the board how to do your job because I don't want you guys micromanaging ours specifically. I'm just saying whatever steps you take, please allow it to grant us autonomy as principals to put a personal touch on it so that it fits us and it's an image of what our school is doing.
Gotcha. And then I have one question for Mr. Graham. Like, I guess the reason you did this policy, does it hurt our kids in any way that they have to take an exam? I know you mentioned something about getting scholarships or something for college.
Mr. Graham?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so if you have an A average in a class, the only thing a final exam can do is lower your grade. It can't raise your grade anymore further than an A. So yeah, you can actually lose GPA points if you don't do well on that final for whatever reason.
So that's the only harm. I mean, it's not going to keep them from getting a scholarship or any kind of.
Well, a lot of scholarships are based on GPA and ACT scores, so it could potentially prevent them from getting scholarship money.
Mr. Lancaster?
Yeah, what day it was. Since Mr. Woods is here and, well, I guess Dr. Holton is
Right here. I changed. I moved.
I didn't think you got up here for a long time.
So, I really have to ask, Dr. Holton, I think I know their policy since you guys don't offer exams at all, right?
Well, I was going to ask if y'all had any questions about my email. We did not do exam exemption policy last year. Everybody had to take an exam, which may or may not be why we're sitting here tonight. I don't know. So I emailed you guys kind of my rationale, my thought process behind why we decided to go that route last year and opening up Liberty Creek High School. There were a number of points in there. I might be the weird principal. Like if a student has something going on in their life that is great or really traumatic, I want them to be able to step away for a minute and focus on those things without feeling like they would be punished for violating exam exemption policy. Know that when you put the policy in place, in my opinion, if you put an exam exemption policy in place, yes, it does feel like a punishment. Whether or not we say it's a punishment or not, it feels like it, because I wasn't going to have to take an exam, but now I am. You know, I lost a sibling, a parent, a grandparent. You know, maybe it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. You know, I had a student that qualified. He didn't qualify for the Boston indoor track, but he qualified for one in Virginia. And the parent said, is he going to be punished? I was like, no, I'm going to excuse those days. Like, please go and participate in this event because that has scholarship opportunities within it. And so, so we did adopt a policy for this semester for seniors only. And that was after I got some feedback from the community. I looked at surrounding schools and districts, both private and public, and it was a lot of senior heavy exam exemption policies. So that's where we landed currently, but no, we did not have a policy last year. Our growth scores were very, very high last year. We grew our students. Attendance was not an issue for us. We won the attendance cup this last semester before we put in the exam exemption policy for seniors. So just like Dr. Miller said, I think you're going to have a hard time finding actual data that supports or doesn't support a policy. It just doesn't exist. It really depends on your student body. In my opinion, it worked really well for us last year. We're still tweaking things, you know, even in year two. So that's why we decided to do seniors for this second semester.
And Mr. Woods, you guys, I think what I ended up hearing, and the way I look at it, I mean, you know, I have a different management style at work than other bosses do. So, you know, the people that work under me, they might love me, they might not, but it might be different from what they're used to. And I just, you know, whenever we first started discussing this, I was kind of thinking, well, yeah, that makes sense. We have one uniform policy, but at the same time, it really boils down to Dr. Miller. You know, she's basically saying, hey, I don't allow exemptions, but now I'm willing to do it for this policy and change my school a little bit. Mr. Duffer allows exemptions 9 through 12. He's like, well, I'm willing to change it a little bit, but I mean, it's really us stepping in and saying, hey, we know better than you do, and I just ain't ready to make that decision because I can tell you, I don't really know what I'm doing half the time, and not as a manager.
We've got some pretty passionate people that run our schools, as you can see. I've had the privilege of teaching, coaching in 4 different schools in 3 different states. So I've been everywhere. I graduated from a small town in Kentucky where seniors didn't have to take the finals, but I did okay. I mean, I ended up with a doctorate degree somehow, and I didn't take a final exam my senior year. So I was fine. And I get what Ann's saying too, you know, I think it just depends on the kid. My kid's gonna graduate from Portland. He's got the 32 ACT. If he doesn't take a final, I think he's just gonna be just fine wherever he goes to college. Some of them may not be. When I came to Sumner County, I taught 17 years high school math, by the way, before I became a principal. When I came to Sumner County in 2020, the policy was ABC 3-2-1. It's been like that for years, probably, Scott, hasn't it? I mean, you know, if you have an A, you miss 3 days.
We don't really have a policy. We have, you know, board policies right now just says we don't give exams in EOC courses, but there's some type of assignment because they were just finishing up. We hit that point where it was going to be like 35% of their grade was going to take place in the last 2 weeks of the semester.
Right, and there is a lot of validity to what Ann was saying with those EOC tests. The fact that we have to give those so early in the semester just blows me away. And I talk to William Labyrinth about this all the time because if you really want the best out of your kids, you got to figure out a way to get more teaching in and testing at the end. We're testing April and stuff, and there's 20-something days left to go. You know, when you only have 90 days in a semester and you're testing after 70 of them, especially as a math person, that's pretty rough. But regardless, going back to the old policy, the way I came to ours that we currently have is I didn't like the ABC 3-2-1. I thought it was a little bit too chaotic. So I kind of put together a panel of our teachers who I consider to be the best and brightest in my school a couple of years ago, and we changed it not to A only. My group wanted to do A and B because they felt there was some validity in that kid who really, really tries hard but can't quite make the A. So we went to A and B, and then we changed the attendance to same thing on the discipline, no OSS, no SS, but the attendance, which is completely different than any of theirs, was no unexcused absences. And here was the reason for that, because they already get 5 board parent notes for whatever, you know, sickness or whatever. But then I had a lady approach me one time, a mom, and her kid was in a car wreck. So he missed 12 days, but this kid was like 34 ACT, and I'm going to tell him to take a final exam at the end of the semester? That didn't make sense to me, because he could get an A regardless of rigor, no offense. You could make it as rigorous as you want, he was going to knock it out of the park. So we just went to no excused, because in my mind that would at least get the kids in Portland, who's the absence capital of the world, correct, Norma? If I ever win the attendance cup, I'm retiring it. Norman told me when I took his job 10 years ago, worst absenteeism in a district. I had no idea what she's talking about. Now I know. But anyway, we just said no excused absence or unexcused absences because we wanted them to at least bring in that doctor's note for being in the hospital or whatever. And if they do that, you know, I had a kid last semester, I think he had 12 total days out. 7 of them were doctor stuff, and the 5 were the parent notes. But you know, he had like 92 averages, and I could give him whatever test you want. It's not going to matter. He's going to pass it. So I don't know that one set, and I understand what Ann's saying too. You know, you got 20 days left. Let's let everybody be there, take a test. I don't know that there's any one right answer. That's why Mr. Duffer was saying earlier, and Ann was saying it's going to be hard to create it like that. It is an incentive, like Mr. Graham was saying, the kids who are chronic, they're not worried about exam exemptions. I mean, they're going to be chronic, you know. When you get kids missing 30 and 40, that's the last thing from their mind. But when you've got kids kind of on that cusp, they bring those notes in for sure because they don't want to have an unexcused. And if there's any kind of any little thing that they can do to be exempt, they fight for that sometimes. And it might be a small group. Maybe it's that small little group that actually is your college-bound kids, because they know it's kind of incentive. So that's why we've done it at our school, and I think that's why most schools have stayed with it. The only two I know that haven't done it, any kind of exam exemption, are these two. And honestly, when I hear them talk about it, I'm thinking, that's not terrible. I mean, because I'm learning from them just like you guys are. So maybe we change it to what they're doing. You know, and when I heard Dr. Hope speak to our group, and one of his, I don't know if you emailed it to him, but one of his premises on not doing exam exemptions was a difference in the teachers. Like teacher A, super rigor, getting an A in there is ridiculous. Teacher B, not so much. You could get an A over here pretty easy. He don't want to have them kind of kids fighting over, well, I want that teacher over this teacher and that kind of stuff. And I thought about that too. I was like, not terrible. You know, not terrible at all. So it's going to be tough to come up with that policy, just like you were saying. I mean, you can be all over the place, because I think we all make pretty good arguments, don't we? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing I hear from you, from all of y'all is, well, two things. One, if we set a policy, or if this board decides, hey, we're going to set this policy and this is going to be the policy, it kind of takes away the let's try this and see if it works approach. And, you know, because from what I hear is you had an exemption policy last year for seniors. You didn't have an exemption policy at all last year. Now you're trying not one at all, and you're trying one for just seniors, and you're going to see how it works. And my guess is if 3 years from now, one of y'all has just knocked it out of the park with scoring on everything, then the other one might say, well, hey, we're going to try that, or, you know, but it gives you some flexibility to see what works for your school. And I mean, I'm not the person to say, hey, I know better than y'all do, because I can promise you I don't. So, but I appreciate all of y'all being here, and I think I have, you know, we do have a policy, or we have two policies in front of us, but we also have, you know, option 3, which is just leave it alone. So, but I think, you know, that's what I needed to know. And I've talked to some people, some other principals that aren't here tonight as well, and they've emailed their thoughts. So I appreciate y'all being here to answer the question.
I think, Mr. Brewer, if I could jump in just for a second, I think one of the things that we're going to need to consider, Ms. Herron has been working a lot through 504s, and I think one of the things, if we put a policy forward for exam exemptions that we're going to have to consider is, you know, there's a lot of lawsuits that are out there now when we are excusing or not exempting or not exempting kids for legitimate medical conditions. So let's say you've got a 504 for Crohn's disease, and you don't get to exempt because you have Crohn's disease. We're putting ourselves in you know, lawsuit haven by, you know, regardless of how we look at exams, the courts will look at them as you're extending something or denying something based on a child's legitimate medical excuse. So, you know, that's another layer to consider when we're here. You know, if you, Ms. Herron may want to speak up, but I mean, I think the thing is, if you do away with exemptions, you remove the legal liability in that regard. In addition to some of the other things that Dr. Miller said, if you don't, then we need to seriously consider how we look at. And I think this is where it becomes really hard. You know, I've said all along, my experience as a principal was it's something I wish I'd always done away with, but I never did because they were popular. And then I always spent time like a kid. You inevitably have a kid that's playing sports for the school and they tear an ACL. Do you exempt that or not? You know, they were representing the school and got hurt. Then you have a kid that has COVID or the flu that's a great kid. They miss 5 days. Do you exempt them or not? It's really, and I think you've seen it tonight, I appreciate our principals coming out to speak because they've given you a real snapshot of what it's like at each of their schools too, and I think they all manage their schools very effectively and well, and bringing different things to bear to see. But I think that the hard part when you start trying to create a district level policy is going to be that you know, some of the things like how do you tease out what's a legitimate absence and what's not? And I think Ms. Herring may have some information about that.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I think was missing, and it's just a component that I think about that maybe not everybody does, but you kind of venture into potentially discriminatory when you're putting a principal in a position to make a decision on what is justified absence and what isn't. And there's no way, when you're giving everyone individual autonomy to decide individually, there's just no way for that to not be unfair at some point to somebody. So, you know, obviously I don't have a vote in this, but I do think that it causes, and there's some case law to support that. I think the case law that I've read most recently says that district-wide, if you're doing something the same and you are applying it exactly the same, then the law tends to support the school system. But if you do things differently and you apply them differently, then there's some potential liability there. So I just would like to add that because I think it's pertinent to the conversation and I didn't hear it addressed. And also, I think it's unfortunate that a principal would have to decide what absence is justified and what isn't. Because y'all, Scott used several examples, you know, Crohn's disease, torn ACL while they're playing a sport for the school. Those are really hard to say they don't, you know, they don't qualify and you're gonna lose your exemption. But also a death in the family and all those things. But if you have an exemption policy, it has to be the same or we're vulnerable.
Mr. Daniels.
Yeah, you know, I think Mr. Lancaster brought up a good point. You know, listening to our principals speak, and they're all passionate about how they run their schools, and we've really got three options. Number one is no exemptions. And that's going to require some of our principals to change the way they manage their schools. Number two is we build an exemption policy that they all follow, which is going to require some principals to change the way they manage their school, right? And number three is we don't make changes and let them manage their school. I mean, we just finished talking about bleachers, and one of the comments that I think was made that was, you know, the graduation at Hendersonville High School. It's a part of their community. Every community is different. You know, we just came through, you know, this big push of One Sumner, Team Sumner, and we are all one community. But we also have some differences. And there are some things within each community that make them unique. And I think our principals are the ones that are involved with the community. They're involved with the leaders, they're involved with the businesses, they're involved with the coaches, they're involved with the PTO groups. And so they have a good read on what works within their community. And so I guess one of the questions that I would ask Dr. Langford, you know, as a former principal, is this a policy? Is this a hill that you would die on? I guess what I'm asking is, if we came back and said, you know what, we've had great discussion, we've got feedback, but right now we don't think we need to move forward with a policy that's going to require our principals to go with either option A or B. Are you comfortable with that?
I think, you know, to pick up on what Ms. Herring said, we're increasingly putting our principals in a path of potential lawsuits because there are entire law firms now that are dedicated to filing 504 lawsuits. I think at the same time, I think you hear from the principals that there are some, you know, there are some different nuances and things that they want to hit in their local community. I mean, if you ask me, I think that the easiest thing for a school board to do, I don't think at the school board level you will ever write a policy that will hit all the needs of each individual school. Unless you just said, the only policy I think that you can issue from the school board level is just say no exemptions. Because otherwise you've just basically transferred what principals face all the time to the school board. I think that you have I think that when I was over instruction, moving up from being a principal, the complaints that I would usually hear from parents were usually things like, I got one every year from a child who had Crohn's disease. And she, it's a little bit like what Mr. Woods mentioned, She was a 30 plus on the ACT. She was doing great. She got all her makeup work and did it religiously, but she had to take an exam because the exam exemption policy was based on attendance and grades. So she had the grades, but not the absences. I think that's a problem. I don't think, like, if you ask me, I think that what Dr. Miller shared is spot on. Like, you'll never find any evidence that says that attendance policy or that exemption policies create incentives to attend school. I don't necessarily think that it hurts it, but I don't think you'll ever find any evidence that it helps it. I think that we see a lot of evidence that, I think the big question is what is a statement we want to make as a board in terms of where we set our standards and things like that. But I do think it would be very hard. I think you either make no policy except what we have, which is that we don't give exams in EOC courses, or I think you go with no exemptions. I don't think there's anything in between, because how do you piece out, like, do you go with Westmoreland's policy, do you go with Portland's, do you go with Liberty Creek's, do you go with White House? Because there's going to be parts and pieces of each that make sense to you, and then you're going to end up with this monolithic policy that's going to be hard for them to implement and follow, because once we put it into policy, they've got to carry it out, and we got to help support them to make sure they carry it out. So I'm sensitive to not putting them in a position to have to execute a policy that doesn't work, or is just really hard to define, because it's just, anytime you define something as a policy at the district level that includes something like, I can assure you that you'll have 15 exceptions the moment you set a rule about attendance or something like that. That's just the like, I mean, we've had kids, like I had a kid one year that was going back to India. I think it's very similar to what Dr. Holt shared. It was they were from India and hadn't been home in like 6 years. They had the opportunity to go, but they were going to miss 6 days at the start of the semester. Makes 100% sense for them to take that trip as a family. There's educational value in it, but they want to know if I would exempt them from their exams. I'm like, I can't. Like, the policy is the policy, and or in the policy at school, not at the district. So I think that's going to be, and at a certain point, if you're building in a lot of autonomy, then there's really not much need for a policy, because they already have the autonomy to set their own policies. So if you wanted to do something like that, I think that you might want to set some baseline, like what's a baseline across, like every school that has an exemption policy has to have these baselines. But I still think even with that, you're really just creating hardship for them. So I guess if you ask me, Mr. Jones, that's been a really long answer to a short question. But I think you're really in the case of saying, no exemptions or autonomy for each school to set their policy. I just think that if you enter into the middle part, you're going to wind up in the same place, which is like you're just going to have people coming up here to appeal a decision at the school because they disagree with the policy. And it's going to be, they're going to stand right over there on that microphone and they're going to lay it out, and you're going to say that 110% makes sense. I had that conversation for 4 straight years with a child from one high school with Crohn's disease who every year made a perfectly legitimate case to be exempted from exams, but it didn't match the school's policy. And I think, like, I'm guessing that's probably a little bit of what Mr. Graham was getting at, and I think that's a real thing. So, I would say those are the 2 options.
Well, and I appreciate that, because that's kind of the way I was leaning it. And I say that I've got, we were talking a little bit about, exams and finals and how they impact grades. I've got an 8th grader right now. And, looking back at his first semester grades, he had a 91 quarter 1, an 89 quarter 2. And when you add in, the numbers and the rounding, he was right there at a 90. Took the final exam, EOC, didn't do well. He does not take tests well, whether it's the standardized test or the exam, and it brought him down to an 89 or an 88 as his final grade, which kept him from getting straight A's for that semester. He also had, trouble in one of his other exams, had a 60 in it. I don't know if I can share this or not. I guess I can since I'm the dad, but he got a 60. He got a 60 on the science exam. His first and second quarter grades were 98. Again, he doesn't take tests well, but At the same time, what I told him is I said, let's look at how we're preparing for those. Are there things that maybe we can do better to help you not be so nervous because you know the content. You're better than this. And so those are things that we've been working on throughout this year. But even with that, I'm of the mentality that either we say there are no exemptions or we don't make any changes to the policy.
Let me add this. There's and I think Ms. Skinner wanted to jump in. There's an amendment in the House right now that would dramatically remake our high school testing. It would basically reduce high school testing to English 1, Algebra 1, and then a science test, probably sophomore, junior year, and then the ACT. At which case, we'll have to really rethink. I mean, honestly, I hope that part passes because I think it gives us the opportunity. I think that if we move from exam exemptions, and I'm sorry, Mr. I'll turn it over to you in just a second. We move from exam exemptions to what is our purpose in high school? Our purpose in high school is to prepare kids for their career. That would give us the opportunity to transition towards let's get kids ready for the ACT and then what comes next. I think that's a pretty positive development that may come, but it's going to also, all of a sudden, we'll have a lot more classes that would qualify to have exams if that happens. But I'm sorry, Ms. Skinner wanted to jump in.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring back up that when Dr. Miller was speaking, that those instructional days from EOC to the end of the year, it doesn't have to be a comprehensive final exam. She used projects, chapter tests, different ways to assess kids for that instructional time. And so it might not be a comprehensive exam. That I think that's where the autonomy is if you go with the no exemptions. I think her goal, which would be my goal, is to keep kids in school for those 180 days. So what that assessment looks like at the end is up to buildings, if that makes sense.
Mr. Gregory. I think we'll all agree that one size does not fit all. And we have a big difference in Sumner County, from magnet schools to Gallatin High School, to Portland High School, to Westmoreland High School, and all the others. Now, if you're in a county that has one, two, or even possibly 3 high schools, you could possibly have a uniform policy. Then you get into students taking standard classes, AP classes, dual enrollment. How do you figure all that? And I don't disagree with any of these principles, what they said, but I believe personally, let me put this word. I've said this about many of our policies. There must be some flexibility. There must be some flexibility. Now, personally, from my point of view, I do believe in the exemption policy. And I believe it needs to be for motivation, incentives, these numbers of days. I know Ms. Miller, and I respect you. It's working. It's working. But personally, and I agreed with Mr. Duffer, a lot of things he said, but personally I believe that there are certain things that need to be an excused absence. For instance, it was mentioned about a death in the family, accidents, certain, I mean, there are reasons. Now, I've known students to go K through 12, 1 through 12, not miss a day. And I've known students if you didn't probe and prompt, try to motivate everything else, simply because a lot of it, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I will say it, is parenting skills. If you miss 30 days a year for your entire school career, it goes. I mean, there's not very many kids that needs to be out that much. But I will say that there occasionally, I mean, you might have a child that could miss 30 days, but it'd be only a one thing. And I'm like one of the principals spoke. If a child can miss 30 days or 20 days or even 15 days and they still get A's, there's not much instruction taking place in the classroom. Now, I've said all of that, and I've said the main word is flexibility. I believe there needs to be some type of flexibility.
Thank you, Speaker. Ms. Hawkins?
I haven't changed my mind. I don't think there should be exemptions for anybody. And I have several reasons in addition to what I've already said. As far as data, there's nothing there's no research, there's nothing you could find that supported that this actually improved students' attendance. But I'll bet you there is data that shows that sick kids come to school more when there's an exemption policy. The kid who has never missed school from kindergarten through 12th grade, I guarantee he went to school or she went to school sick. And probably made other kids sick. So I don't know that it serves a good purpose for encouraging kids to come to school sick. Second, I actually know of a student who was fully capable of taking AP classes, but his mom insisted that he only take regular classes because she knew he would make A's. So he would be exempt and he would have this GPA, but he was fully capable of taking AP courses. But that incentive, if you want to call it that, was incented him to do less. And then thirdly, incentive. What message are we sending if in the form of incentive? I never paid my children money for good grades. I know some people do that. That's not the reason I want them to excel. They should have the incentive of excellence, of doing well for the sake of doing well. If we have incentives, treats, it's almost like we're training a dog. You know, do this the right way and you're going to get a treat. You're going to get a treat. When you get out into the world, are you going to be incentivized to do a good job, or are you going to be chasing after treats? And again, that's just my thought. I think exemptions do more harm than good.
Mr. Lacy?
Mr. Dr. Langford, do we know who our top 3 schools are that has the best attendance? Who has the best attendance?
I think Mr. Woods is Dr. Woods is taking Portland out of the running. I mean, I'll be honest. Philip, Liberty Creek is number 1.
Station Camp won it, I think, the year before me.
So let me tell you the real truth about attendance. It's largely a function of parental affluence. Our school, the more affluent the area is, the lower absenteeism is. And I know one of the reasons is that Ms. Hawkins just said sick kids come to school a lot of times, but then a lot of times too, if your parents are working shift work and they can't afford to take you to the doctor, you just stay home for a couple days. And if you get strep or something, then it's 5 days instead of 2 days. So, you know, that's, if we look at our attendance levels, it's largely, you know, I mean, the correlation would be pretty high between economic disparities and attendance. So you would expect that Liberty Creek, Station Camp, Hendersonville would be at the top, and then you would kind of go down from there. I think you'd see White House, you know, I think also our schools, I want to give a shout out to our schools because they do a tremendous job. I mean, you know, we tease Dr. Woods about it, but he's got probably the best attendance clerk in Sumner County. Like, she works tirelessly to get kids at school, and most of our schools do, but it's been a historic battle in some of our communities. I mean, I can remember in 2018 when I came up, Miss Dam actually went to a doctor's office in Westmoreland or Portland, because we had something like 35% of our absences were being excused. Oh, Miss Herron. Okay. Miss Dam delegated, but Miss Herron actually went to a doctor's office because they were just writing notes for everything. And so, you know, those would be at the top. I can get you the list. Yeah.
I know Mr. Graham or District 9, I know he probably had the best of intentions, but I think it'd probably be best, in my opinion, to kind of leave it the way it is and allow each school to do what they believe is best.
Ms. Lexi, Ms. Andrews?
Yeah, so Ms. Miller and Dr. Miller and Dr. Holt. No, I want to give recognition where recognition is due. With both of you not having exam exemptions, and I know that a large reason why we give exam exemptions is because of attendance. What are other things that you're doing to get in place that to draw the kids to come to school? Especially, I mean, if you won the attendance cup, you're obviously.
I'll just do the things that we do. One story that came to mind, speaking of affluent schools versus, you know, ones that are less affluent. We build relationships. Everything's based on relationships and expectations. We speak to our children. We support our children. I have students from our least affluent area that this year, no attendance policy, are Ubering to school because their parents are third shift workers and they don't have a car, and they're coming because they don't want to let their personal finance teacher down, or because I meet them at the door, or because they get snacks in the office, or so I really want to teach them that it's the people and it's the thing that you're striving for. It's you know, a privilege to come to school every day, but it's a privilege for me to go in that office and work with these children every day. Without kids, I don't have a job, and they know that, which means you parent hard, you parent tough, but it's a warm firm. So our biggest weapon is just loving our kids and communicating. They know we love them, that we know their name, we know their family. And we celebrate the little things. We celebrate going from a D to an F. I mean, from an F to a D. That's why the policy that we had, it was the 3 criteria, because I was the kid that sat in the front of Algebra 2 and worked hard because my mom's the scariest woman in the world, and I pulled a C. And I had a coach that put me in the study hall until my Algebra 2 teacher went and said, this child's doing everything she can. She needs to be on the court because now she's really hyper in class and she's not passing Algebra 2. So we want to be equitable, not fair. And equity means you meet people where they are and you love them to where they want to be. And that's honestly what we do every single day. So our consistency in our discipline, our attendance, checking on kids, loving on kids when they're there. I tell them all the time, got to get you here, we got to keep you safe, and we got to teach you something. So I can't speak to anything other than that. It's nothing real fancy. It's just, we know when you're not here. The one thing we did this year was if a student is absent in a classroom, we asked our teachers to contact, call, email, remind message, some teachers leave Post-it notes on their desk, hey, we missed you yesterday, hope you're okay. So that was the one big shift we made this year, which seems tiny, but it's been huge. Kids really noticed, like, hey, Miss So-and-so realized I wasn't there yesterday, checked on me, called my mom, called my dad. So that's kind of where we are. I'll let Dr. Holt speak to his structures as well.
Really, I'll just echo what Dr. Langford said. It's really hard to move the attendance needle. I was in metro schools for 11 years prior to coming to Sumner County. You know, Dr. Woods has one of the best cultures in the county. with his Renaissance program and the stuff that he does up there. And if he's saying that his attendance is struggling, it's not because his teachers aren't loving the kids and the culture isn't good. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, I've been through all the Title I rallies in Metro and getting parents involved. It goes back to whether or not parents are going to value the education to a high level or not, and that's unfortunately what it primarily will boil down to is how they view it. So I don't think we do anything special. We can always say that, you know, our Tier 1 instruction, you know, drives them, or you know, whatever incentives you give, but really it boils down to how it's valued at home.
Well, I think that hits you on where my heart is when I heard through this and you know, talking through having a uniformed district policy. A couple of reasons why personally I feel like that it is needed is, one is I feel like we have more blended families now than we ever have. And I think when you have blended families and you have kids that are going to multiple schools and you have parents that are trying to keep up with each policy is at that school and what kid missed here and there, and especially, you know, they look at towards the end of the year and they're trying to plan a vacation, well, this kid can leave early because they're exempt from their exams, but now we gotta wait because this kid can't, or I think it adds additional burdens onto those families of just trying to keep up with that information. Is very simple on why it makes it easier to do it, you know, something across the board. Additionally, I feel like it's another instance of we need to remember, why are we here? And Mr. Wise says it's about the kids. And so it's really easy for us to go back to what we did when we were in high school, or what our preconceived notions are as far as, well, it should be this way or it should be this way. And I think we really need to take the time to reflect and see, okay, what about this generation of kids? What is this generation of kids looking at, and what are we putting them up against? You know, I think there's something to be said of not doing exemptions. You know, I've heard both ways, that once the kids get to college, a lot of schools, professors don't offer exemptions, and then I know that some professors do offer exemptions and so forth. I think we do our kids a disservice if we set them up in high school to expect an exemption to get to college and not have an exemption. Where on the reverse, if we set them up in high school and have the expectation that you don't have an exemption, and they get to college and they do, then it does become more like a reward. Like, well, this, wait, what? This is what, you know, I've always expected it to be. But then if you get to college and they give, you know, hey, I'm going to give you an exemption, I mean, that's, you know, they were ready for it. I will say, having a child that is in her first year of college, you know, we had lots of conversations, hey, what do you think? What, you know, and I'm like, do you think you were prepared? And she was a kid that did take AP courses and rigorous courses, and she said, it's not that the work is harder, it's that there's more of it. So for her, the transition hasn't necessarily been as difficult, but I have to think about the kids who, that wasn't their high school experience. The kids who, like you said, you know, I remember never been as mad my senior year as when we found out who valedictorian was. And it was the guy who chose to take the standard classes and got all A's, knowing he could have taken the honors classes. So, you know, and I hear that a lot, like, well, I don't want to put my kid in that class because I don't want to affect, you know, their GPA. But in the long run, they're going to get to the next level and possibly not be prepared. So I do understand the support of no exemptions. I mean, it just, you know, we have to decide. We need to decide in Sumner County what our level of excellence is and what our level of expectation is going to be for our students. I know, you know, we've talked a lot about the kids that are at the affluent schools versus the kids that are at the socioeconomic, you know, Title I schools, and providing them the same opportunities. Well, we should have the same expectations for all students. and that should be, they are capable, they are able to take a final exam. The other question that I have though is for students who take dual enrollment, those finish earlier because of just how they're structured and so forth. Do y'all also require them to do some other exam, or when that course is done, that course is finished?
Dual enrollment for us is different. We only offer it first and fourth, and that's on the college schedule so that they are. Our main thing is we don't want kids leaving and coming back. But safe schools, all the work that our county does, they're amazing. You don't want kids leaving campus and coming back for any reason whatsoever. So we do them first and fourth. They're on the college schedule with the college grading schedule. Because that's another piece too, like Philip said, it does boil down to the parents. But if we as the governing body of our school board don't value 180 days in our policies, the parents aren't going to value them in their homes. Like we've got to say 180 days is 180 days, and it is important because we love your kids. We want to pour into them all that time. So as far as dual enrollment goes, that's the only group that does not do that. Then we try to stagger those first and fourth blocks to hit the safety aspects. Like I said, get them here, keep them safe, teach them. That falls under number 2. We got to keep them safe. So I don't know if that's it for you.
I was just thinking, like specifically, we've talked about exempting seniors, you know, and that's kind of the time frame in which they're going to be taking. We would hope that more and more students will be taking dual enrollment classes. So there's some validity there in allowing seniors to be exempt just because of that type of scheduling.
Even if you had an exemption policy for seniors, if they were in a dual enrollment class, they wouldn't be exempt. Yeah. You have to follow it's outside of our control.
Right, but they're scheduling wise, like if they had 2 dual enrollment classes.
We wouldn't bring it back. We wouldn't bring it
Well,
back
or
for
like
school
just, they wouldn't be there, like.
Right.
There's.
We do the same thing with AP because AP is made by College Board, so they set their final exam schedule, and once they sit for that AP exam, they use that as enrichment time because there's no other
the curriculum for that.
Yes, ma'am, it's over at
So
that.
yeah, just thinking, you know, they do senior project, or their schedule, the senior schedule is typically a little bit different than the other.
Ms. Hayes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Brewer. With all the discussion and the last component of this, I kept thinking we just needed a parental policy. Maybe we need to go to that, but that would probably be an overreach, would not be. But then again, the no exemption would keep those students, a requirement to keep them there for the 180-day instructional period. So then, in a way, parents would be held accountable for that as well. I appreciate the principals all getting together and having this discussion. And those of you that spoke tonight, appreciate it. We need to hear this so that as we make these decisions. Thank you. I wanted to go back and ask Ms. Herron. Always the liability aspect of something raises question. So do you have cases that you could send us and let us read through? And have we had a situation in this county that could have been a potential lawsuit over numbers of days and exemptions, and why is my child being held to this? Have we had that here in this county?
I can speak to the fact that, and I'll be glad to get you a copy of what I read the other day, because it was related to a 504 case and exemptions, and exam exemptions. What I can speak to, I can't speak to all the legal pieces, but I can tell you that at the end of every semester, we start hearing from parents. The nurses in the schools do, and the 504 supervisor does. We start hearing a lot of complaints from parents that we have to filter for the reasons that I outlined earlier. You know, for the what, depending, and it's all different from each school because everybody does something different.
So who makes the decision then for it to just like, okay, your child is gonna...
Typically the principal is put in the position of making the call.
Okay. They're the person that's the final call is made by the principal.
Ms. Hayes, Mr. Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank the principals for caring enough to get together to try to figure out what's the best thing for children. So thank you all. And Ms. Hayes, I think, kind of stole my question. I don't know how she was able to read my mind. Well, I guess it's pretty easy to do. But anyway, Ms. Herron, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. If we have no policy, we are leaving our administrators and faculties more susceptible from the legal sense.
I am no lawyer,
I know.
but from what I've read, we're a little more vulnerable when we have all different policies. And then there's different ways to enforce the existing policies. So as long as we have the same thing, so the same thing could be no exemption policy or whatever you guys decide. As long as we're doing it and enforcing it consistently, then the case law that I read, the school was protected. It's when you're leaving it up to different people to do different things, I think that it would put us more vulnerable.
Okay, thank you for that. Prior to hearing you originally say that tonight, I think like Mr. Lacey, I was leaning toward, leave it like it is. They're doing an excellent job steering their own ship, let them steer it. But if we do that, from what if I understand correctly, we may be leaving Dr. Miller out there vulnerable from a legal sense. So I think what we need, if we're going to continue to study a high school final exam exemption policy, I think we need to take our time. We need to talk with people in different aspects of the school system. I never would have imagined, coming from the health field of our school system, that would be a concern. So we as a board have an ominous task before us to either decide to, okay, let's don't have a policy and let's leave Dr. Miller out there vulnerable. That's not fair to her. Or let's have a strict no exemption policy, and maybe that's not fair to Dr. Woods and the way he runs his ship in Portland. So we have a task, and I say that we take our time, get it, whatever decision we make, I pray it'll be the best decision that we could have made. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to extend my gratitude to the principals for taking time tonight after what I'm sure has been a long day as well, and also get together and give their input. I agree with Mr. Wise. I think that discussion and deliberation and debate and taking our time is absolutely the way to go, and I can't wait to have more vigorous conversations regarding this topic in the future.
Mr. King.
Yeah, I'm just concerned. The way I understand why this policy was brought before us is, there were some concerns, and the concern was, and the motive was, to help students. I would be, so let's have a policy, and the policy is to, the goal is to help students, right? That's what we ultimately want to do. And what I'm hearing tonight, I'm hearing great things from Dr. Miller. Her program seems to be working great. Mr. Duffer, his program sounds like it's working great. Dr. Holtz, Dr. Woods. And I would hate to think that we brought this idea to the board, and it's turned into something where now we're meddling in something maybe we shouldn't have interfered with as a board. Because if things are working great at those schools, and the culture there at each school is going to be different, and this, how they achieve success is going to be different. I would hate to jeopardize that in some way by drafting a policy that would drastically change what they're doing, whether just a no exemptions across the board thing, and I kind of like what Mr. Duffer said, that, these tests are not by any means the only indicator of success in the course. So that's something I think we need to think about. I'm just concerned that we might be, like you said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm wondering if we're looking for in our further discussions on this. I want to, I don't want to look for something that, try to find something that's broken when it's not, and try to fix it when we don't need to fix it. That's my point. So I like that schools have autonomy. I like that they do different things for their students. There's different incentives for different things. I've had incentives in the classroom that backfired on me, and some that worked. I had a case where I told the class I was having trouble with cell phones, and I told the class, this is college level, this is freshman. I told the students, all right, leave your cell phone on the table. You'll get an extra 10 points on your exam. The whole class left their cell phone. Next section, next class, another section of the same class. I gave the same incentive, and they all kept their cell phones. So that class, they didn't care. So I'm just saying there's differences in, one size doesn't fit all, like I think Mr. Gregory said, or somebody said. So I just want to put that out there. I don't want to be meddling in something that we don't need to be interfering with. And I think maybe that's something we need to think about. I'm not, so anyway, I like what you all are doing, and I wouldn't want to interfere at this point. Thanks.
Mr. Lancaster?
Yeah, I'm kind of mindset. I'd like to look at some case law, like she had said. Apologize. It's my brain hadn't sprung forward yet. Like Ms. Herron said, but I think I'd also like to look at the possibility. If we've got the option, instead of drafting a universal policy, maybe leaving some leniency open, but setting some guidelines that if you're going to have a policy that has attendance component to it, it has to, we have some universal guidelines that might have to go that way. Kind of a hybrid approach, if that's an option that maybe, our attorney can look at and say, hey, that should be okay, or whatever. But at the end of the day, I don't think, I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but I don't feel like in 2 weeks that I'll have enough information to, even give it a shot in the dark. So I would really like to take a look at some of this 504 issues that we may have, and see if there might be a way at another study session to, tweak this again, because hey, we've been beating up on the library review materials for 18 months. I think we can, take a couple more cracks at this one, but I do, appreciate what y'all have brought forward. But I think we could, maybe look at from a legal standpoint, or a potential legal liability standpoint, what we need to do there as well. So, thanks.
Mr. Daniels?
Yeah, I was kind of in agreement with Mr. King, Mr. Lancaster. I'm not sold on the fact of us actually needing a policy. If we want to give autonomy to our staff and our principals, but I do kind of think, as Ms. Herron mentioned, it reminds me a little bit of the bleachers. Like, we didn't think the bleachers were a problem until they collapsed, right? And so by kind of opening up this policy and digging into it, we're starting to recognize that, hey, maybe there are some things that we need to be aware of. And so maybe there are guidelines, maybe it's not policy, maybe it's procedures that we put in place that say, hey, if you want to have no exemptions, that's great. But if you want to offer exemptions, here's the things that you need to be aware of. If you're saying 5 days, that's great, but you also have to include X, Y, and Z. You know, because there are kids with chronic illness, and there's nothing that you can do about that. You know, if they're still getting good grades, if they're able to study, you know, those types of things. So there's a lot of other factors that I think we have to look at in regards to making the decision. But I still kind of come back to the same spot that, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean we need to have a formal policy. It could just mean, hey, do what you're continuing to do, but if you're doing this, just make sure you incorporate this. Or maybe the policy says you have autonomy to make your own decision, but if you offer this, then you need to do this. If you offer this, you need to do this. So at least some of those guidelines are in place, and we limit any legal exposure that we might have to the school system.
Mr. Gregory?
A large percent of scholarship money comes from your ACT and your SAT or both, and leadership qualities and involvement in school and community. Therefore, if that is true, and I know it is, you're going to have high attendance to have good ACT scores, SAT scores, and be involved in school and community. And that's where your big scholarship money comes from. Sadly to say, I think it should be a little bit more on the GPA, but it's really not. Does anybody disagree with that? Thank you.
Ms. Andrews?
Yeah, so just, you know, through discussion, a couple of things is, and I know this is not a conversation that we're having right now, but I do know that it's conversations that I've heard sporadically and so forth, is giving students equal opportunities across the district. And you know, I've heard like, and there, I don't know that we're at a place where we could truly entertain this right now, but you know, if you've got a student attending one school, can they leave and then attend another school for a particular CTE course or so forth? I know that scheduling nightmare, there's a lot of things with that. However, this type of policy is exactly something that would have to be addressed, because if you have two schools that have two different attendance policies, and then you have kids that are going to two different schools for classes, how do you determine their eligibility then for exemptions? So that's one thing to consider of why it's good to have, you know, uniform policies. Again, if you have a student that is maybe transient and they move and they've been attending one school that has one policy and they're lining everything up to make sure that they're exempt, and then their family has to move and they now attend another school, they may enter that school automatically not exempt because the policy's different. Which, you know, changing environment is tough enough as it is. And that's something that I remember myself actually doing as a 7th grader, moving from one county to another. I was exempt from my exams in Sumner County. I moved to Wilson County, and I turned around and had to take exams at a school I had just started attending, because that's what they were doing at the time. So again, I think we need to focus on students and how this is going to impact them directly, and even in those little details. And then again, I would say, there is a timeline on when we need to make a decision, whether it's yes, no, or whatever it may be. Dr. Langford, if you can kind of give us, because our principals are going to have to make their student handbooks, and this would need to be included in it. When is that right now? So it's not necessarily something that...
We're registered 8th graders now.
Right. So, you know, in order for them to get their handbooks updated and so forth, and especially ready for August, there is a timeline that we need to have it. If we're gonna make, you know, either yes, no, or hey, it's actually gonna be next year.
Why don't we let us we'll get the case law emailed out, and then I would kind of like to, honestly, in addition to what's been raised here tonight, I'd like to see what the legislature does, because if they, you know, to me it's right now you're about evenly split between EOC bearing courses and non-EOC bearing, especially freshman and sophomore year. It'll be completely different if we we'll have to rework the grading policy if they make that bold a change to classes. So it'll be a little bit, there'll be another couple of variables thrown into the equation if that happens. So we'll have some other things to look at, but we can absolutely get that, because you're right, if we're going to make a change for next year, it'll have to be pretty quickly. Dr. Miller will be on the front end of getting student handbooks out, but we can, we can work around that with a little bit of time. But yeah, we'll be happy to do that.
All in, all done?
Oh, I got two quick announcements, Mr. Brewer.
I'm gonna get to you in just a second. I'm not quite in and all done.
I'm sorry.
I want to make sure everybody else was, and then I have sat here and listened to some of the finest minds in the business that stood up there at that microphone a while ago. Doctorate degrees, master's degrees, all kinds of degrees. That's way above my head. We are in good hands. And I am so proud of them that, and being a believer in more government is not good. I think we're putting more government into their jobs, and with this policy, I understand the intent of it. It was good. Nobody's saying anything bad about that. But I think we're putting too much government into these people and expecting them we're tying their hands and feet up and throwing them in the lake and telling them to swim out. And I think we need to bow out. That's my opinion on it. Now, I'm all in, all done.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brewer. Two really quick announcements. I want to thank everybody for your prayers and support of Beach High School as Sebastian, as the search has been going on. We had a wonderful prayer vigil on Sunday night. Mr. King was there. And I want to say, if you had the opportunity, let me give a shout out to Ms. Brown and her team. They ran, Katie Brown. Amanda's trying to steal her thunder. They spent the entire weekend, last weekend, at Shackle Island Volunteer Fire Department, running the command center, dispatching buses, doing a million other things. Y'all, the technological sophistication of that search was amazing with the app and everything. Like Katie pulled up at one point, we were watching Susan Comer, one of our principals, was leading one of the search teams, and we could see what apartment she was at, like as she was knocking on doors. Just unbelievable. They have searched thoroughly. We want to continue to keep, we're in the stage of the journey now with Sebastian missing, where the number one thing we can do is keep it loading on algorithms, keep it in the national news, because somewhere he's out there, and it's going to take somebody seeing him at a gas station or somewhere else, and that's the thing we can do, is keep that elevated on algorithms and search engines and the news and everything else. So we want to continue to do that and continue in our prayers for the beach community and for Sebastian's family. The other thing, last week at Portland West Middle School, we had a kid in football practice collapse, and had it not been for Miss Heron's nurse, the student would not have made it. Having an AED that we've put in every school, they used it twice before he was life flighted to the hospital. CPR was administered, and I think the power of it is, not only is he going to make a full recovery, he suffered no neurological damage as a result of this, because his heart was literally, he was in the death gasp phase. He was literally probably seconds, if not minutes, if not seconds away from us losing him. And I just want to commend Ms. Heron and her team, and our first responders. I mean, throughout all this, the search for Sebastian and everything, our law enforcement, our first responders, and our folks in Sumner County are just the very best. And the relationship that we've built is just second to none. So I'm deeply thankful for their team. I just wanted to share that with y'all. We're going to try to have her here, if not at the next board meeting, then soon, so we can honor and recognize her.
All in, all done?
Yes, sir.
All right, we are adjourned.